to Econolocast. Have you ever thought about how maybe actions designed to, drive wedges and isolate rivals, could actually end up doing the exact opposite, pulling them closer together? What if history wasn't just repeating itself, but doing so with a really unexpected, almost ironic twist, showing us how maybe a global superpower could inadvertently set the stage for its competitors to unite? We are seeing a truly significant global shift right now, and it's reshaping relationships between major world powers in ways that are, well, frankly, quite surprising. Something big seems to be brewing, but what is it exactly?
Indeed. And we're talking about what some political analysts are actually now calling a reverse Nixon moment, the stage for this unfolding drama. Well, it seems to be the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, held in Tianjin, China. That's where these seemingly improbable alliances are beginning to look more solid, and it seems driven by a series of events that, frankly, started with a very different intention.
Right, and that's our mission today on this deep dive. We're going to unpack how what might look like, straightforward trade policies can inadvertently and quite dramatically redraw the entire global chessboard. We'll explore the specific triggers that kick things off, and then we'll dive into the fascinating, often counterintuitive consequences. Consequences impacting not just geopolitical power, but potentially everything from, say, global trade routes to maybe even the value of your own currency. There's a lot going on under the surface here. Okay, so let's unpack this. Our story and this whole global shift, it really begins with a specific catalyst, doesn't it? The trade policies, specifically those implemented by the Trump administration leading up to 2025. This wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It felt like it was about sending a very clear message. And the impact, well, it resonated far beyond what maybe was initially expected.
Exactly. We saw the U.S. administration impose some steep tariffs on Indian goods, some reaching as high as 50%. The stated reason from the U.S. side was pretty direct. It was framed as punishment for India's continued oil trade with Russia, and also a violation of shared democratic principles. That was the official line. India, though, saw these actions very differently. They labeled them economic coercion. Their view was, basically, these tariffs were designed to force a change in their sovereign foreign policy, not just address trade stuff.
But here's where it gets really interesting, the pivotal twist. While India faced these tariffs, Trump's stance on China remained, well, aggressively consistent, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. The focus there stayed squarely on what the administration called unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. That narrative had been building for quite some time.
No. So the stated goal seemed clear: punish India, pressure China, keep them separate, maybe even isolate them. But what's really striking is how this aggressive push seemed to create almost the opposite effect.
And this is the crucial point, isn't it? There was a clear intended outcome here versus the actual consequence. The goal was presumably, yes, to isolate China and pressure India into aligning with U.S. foreign policy objectives. But the effect, perhaps surprisingly, was this shared sense of resistance. A common grievance, you could say, among these very different nations.
So what does this all mean then? Instead of driving these nations apart, these policies appear to have inadvertently forged some kind of unexpected common ground. It's almost the geopolitical version of the enemy of my enemy is my friend playing out.
Precisely. India, despite its own long-standing and often quite complex historical tensions with China, found itself in a really unique position. Suddenly, it seemed to be aligning, at least tactically, with both Beijing and Moscow. The unifying factor among them wasn't necessarily some new shared ideology, not at all, but rather a collective resistance to what they increasingly describe as U.S. economic overreach. This wasn't just a political handshake. It felt more like a pragmatic, maybe even cynical alignment, forged out of necessity, really, driven by a common adversary rather than shared values, a very modern kind of strategic partnership.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? Tariffs that were maybe meant to break alliances or prevent new ones seem to be actually building them instead. This shared experience of economic pressure from the U.S., it inadvertently provided the fertile ground, the perfect, if unintended, stage for a pivotal moment, that 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit.
Yeah, and to really get the significance of that summit, we need a little bit of context on the SCO itself. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, founded back in 2001, it's grown into one of the world's largest regional alliances, both by population and, sheer geography. It started out with a primary focus on security and counterterrorism, but it has steadily evolved. It's become a much broader platform now for economic cooperation, diplomatic alignment among its members. It's really expanded its scope.
And that 2025 summit in Tianjin, China, that really felt like a defining moment. It was the largest in the SCO's history up to that point. gathering over 10 full members, major players like China, India, Russia, Pakistan, Iran, all there. This created a really rare opportunity for these traditional and sometimes rival powers to find some strategic consensus on a global stage.
And the atmosphere, the messaging around the summit, quite telling. Chinese state media, for instance, heavily emphasized the need for SCO members to oppose hegemony and interference, which was, let's be honest, a thinly veiled but pretty clear jab at U.S. foreign policy.
Oh, yeah.
Hegemony meaning, the dominance of one power. Interference meaning meddling in sovereign affairs. What amplified this sense of unity, almost ironically, was the physical absence of an American delegation.
Right, and among the key interactions, one of the most talked about was that meeting between Indian Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. What made it particularly notable was that it was Modi's first visit to China in over 7 years.
7 years.
That alone signaled, well, at least a significant thawing of tensions, wouldn't you say, if not a full reconciliation?
A definite signal, yes. And the strategic optics were just undeniable. You saw Modi shaking hands with Xi, and later sitting down with Russian President Vladimir Putin. These were powerful images. All three leaders publicly agreed to expand regional trade and, crucially, to push back against unilateral sanctions. Those measures typically imposed by the U.S. without broader international consensus.
Interesting. And if we look at each leader's motivations, Putin, well, he was certainly looking for deeper ties with Asian powers, given the ongoing international sanctions over the Ukraine war. Makes sense.
Absolutely.
For Xi, the summit seemed like a chance to solidify China's leadership in Asia and maybe position the SCO as a more robust alternative to Western-led institutions.
Exactly, a counterweight.
And Modi, he seemed to be walking a very careful diplomatic tightrope. Signaling India's independence, perhaps, from both the West and this new alignment, while also quietly benefiting from the economic opportunities that came from engaging with both sides.
The result, essentially, was this triangle of cooperation, not necessarily driven by some sudden ideological alignment between these very diverse nations, but rather by a very clear shared strategic interest. And arguably, that interest was cemented by a common opposition to Trump's specific pressure tactics.
But isn't this unity potentially incredibly fragile? I mean, you mentioned it's built on a shared grievance, not necessarily a shared vision. India and China, for instance, still have pretty significant border disputes. How does that deep-seated tension fit into this new picture?
That's a really astute observation, and it's precisely this kind of pragmatic, interest-driven alliance that makes this moment so intriguing, and potentially less stable in the long run than, say, a Cold War ideological bloc. The common ground right now seems stronger than the historical friction, but those underlying tensions, absolutely still there, simmering beneath the surface.
Okay, so this triangle of cooperation, born maybe not of ideological unity, but of shared strategic interests against U.S. pressure. This led political analysts to label it something quite profound, a reverse Nixon moment. To really get that, we need to quickly jump back in time, right, to the original Nixon moment.
That's right. Back in 1972, President Richard Nixon made that landmark diplomatic visit to China. A truly groundbreaking move that famously drove a wedge between America's two greatest rivals at the time, China and the Soviet Union. Nixon's strategy was pretty clear: divide and conquer. Gain leverage over both by playing them against each other. Classic geopolitics.
Right. Now, fast forward to today, this reverse Nixon theory suggests that the actions of the Trump administration, rather than driving wedges between powers, have unintentionally bridged gaps. Instead of pushing China and Russia further apart and maybe isolating India, his policies seem to have brought China, Russia, and now potentially India closer together.
It's a really striking contrast in strategies, isn't it? Nixon's very intentional divide and conquer approach versus what appears to be an unintended unite and counterbalance effect in this new era. And this raises a truly important question. Is this new alignment actually by design, or is it a strategic blunder? And the answer, I suppose, depends entirely on your perspective and what outcomes you think were ultimately intended.
So what does this new alignment truly mean for the global landscape then? How does this impact the power dynamics we've sort of grown accustomed to?
Well, there's several key implications starting to emerge. First, on the economic front, there's significant talk, serious talk about creating an SCO development bank. This would be potentially a financial institution designed to rival the likes of the IMF or the World Bank, which, have historically been foundational to the US-led global financial system.
A major challenge, potentially.
A major one. And this isn't just about big finance. It's about these nations creating their own financial rails, potentially reshaping everything from commodity prices you see to perhaps the stability of your own savings as the global financial system diversifies away from that traditional dollar-centric model. Its main purpose: finance infrastructure and trade among member nations using non-dollar currencies, which could, in the long run, further weaken the dollar's global dominance. You see?
Yeah, I see. And it's not just economic, is it? You mentioned they're also pushing for deeper military cooperation.
That's right.
We're seeing plans for joint exercises in critical regions like the South China Sea, Central Asia. And while India, for its part, you said, remains cautious, it's notably not distancing itself from these emerging military ties, which feels like a significant shift in its traditional non-alignment strategy.
Furthermore, look at the energy sector. Russia continues to sell discounted oil to both China and India. This is a really crucial point because it allows Russia to bypass Western sanctions and establish reliable revenue streams that operate entirely outside of Western markets. It fundamentally reshapes the global energy architecture we've known.
Wow. So when you look at all these moves collectively, they really do signal a larger, perhaps profound shift, moving away from what has largely been a US-centric global system towards something more fragmented, maybe a truly multipolar world where power is distributed among several major players.
But it's important to acknowledge, as you rightly pointed out earlier, despite the public handshakes, the joint declarations, it's not all smooth sailing within this emerging bloc. There are still those unresolved India-China border tensions. Very real. Russia's actions in Ukraine remain deeply controversial across the globe. And SCO unity, while it's often more symbolic in some areas than strategically unified in every single aspect, these are complex, sometimes fraught relationships.
Still, the true legacy of that 2025 summit, maybe it won't lie in the treaties signed or the declarations issued, but more in the unmistakable signal it sent across the globe. A declaration, perhaps, that a new chapter in global power dynamics was beginning.
The message felt undeniable. The era of, let's say, uncontested U.S. global leadership is being seriously challenged. And this challenge isn't just coming from long-standing rivals anymore. It's also emerging from nations that have historically been partners, or at least somewhat aligned with Western powers. Trump's absence from that summit, far from diminishing his impact, actually became almost the unspoken reason for this growing alignment. His policies, however they were intended, undeniably shifted the global chessboard, forcing new partnerships maybe unwillingly into being.
So we've navigated this really complex web of tariffs, unexpected alliances, significant geopolitical shifts. The question that kind of lingers for all of us is this a new world order truly in the making? Or is it simply a powerful but maybe temporary reaction to specific policies? What happens next?
That's the core of it, isn't it? And we encourage you, the listener, to consider the long-term ramifications. Think about these evolving alliances and the very real potential for a more multipolar world. Because this isn't just some abstract geopolitical game. It could mean a different future for international trade, for global stability, even for the alliances that influence your own nation's economy and security. What's just fascinating here is that the global response to American power continues to unfold in surprising, often counterintuitive ways. It's really a testament to the dynamic, ever-changing nature of international relations.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you a clearer picture of the forces at play, and maybe something truly profound to ponder as these events continue to unfold. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive, and we encourage you to continue exploring these critical global shifts.